Lawmakers across the country are taking up a controversial way aimed at stopping sex predators from reoffending. Turns out the concept of chemical castration isn't new to Montana. MTN Investigates is digging up the details on a decades-old law that it's unclear if it's ever been used in our state. And it begs the question, could offenders and judges in Montana have been using this practice all along? Here's MTN Investigates' Abby Schultz.
There are almost 2,700 people on Montana's sex offender registry, and their punishments vary from case to case. So when we started in on this story, something caught us by surprise. Turns out lawmakers have taken up the issue of chemical castration before. Chemical castration is controversial, and it's making recent headlines across the country. First in Alabama just last year, now in Tennessee. Currently, a total of 8 states and U.S. territories have some type of chemical castration law, using drugs to reduce recidivism in sex offenders. Turns out Montana does too, and it's been on the books for decades. Flash back more than 20 years. That's when former Democratic Representative Deb Cattell introduced a bill in 1997 calling for chemical treatment for certain sex offenders leaving prison paid for by the state.
For me to carry the bill, it had nothing to do with punishment. Nothing. This wasn't about punishing someone. This was about rehabilitation and public safety.
Cattell is a legal professor. She says she was thinking of some of her students in her online classes who had committed sex crimes. She also says the treatment was cheaper than incarceration.
Why wouldn't we give them the medical tools to make it more likely that they will not offend again?
The bill received broad bipartisan support, but faced a long road to becoming law, including a veto from then-Governor Mark Roscoe, a Republican. Through a veto override, it found its way into state code. Montana became the second state in the country to pass this type of law. More than 2 decades after the law was passed, we wanted to know, is anyone even using it? MTN Investigates checked with district courts across the state. Our investigation couldn't confirm a single case of an offender receiving this treatment. We also learned some providers with the Montana Sex Offender Treatment Association didn't even know the law existed. Nationwide, people who support the idea say it's about protecting the most vulnerable victims of sex crimes, children. But
research itself doesn't pan out that this could be used long term. So.
Critics say it's inhumane and doesn't work. In 1997, the American Civil Liberties Union of Montana opposed the law. They didn't want to be interviewed for this story. In a statement, they said, "Thank you for reaching out to us. Unfortunately, we must decline."
In the general public, when we see a child, for instance, get hurt, we say, well, whatever it's going to take to help not have that happen again.
Bowman Smelko is a licensed psychologist. He says chemical treatment for sex offenders is meant to severely cut back on or eliminate sex drive by reducing testosterone levels. But it's not that simple. The drug only works when people are currently taking it, and some of the potential side effects can turn offenders away from the idea.
Bone density loss, heart issues, gastrointestinal issues, the list goes on.
Under Montana law, depending on the number of offenses or severity of a crime, a judge can impose injections of a drug commonly known as Depo-Provera. It's a common form of birth control for women. Smelko says for men, it's not a cure.
A lot of offenders will not agree to do this. It becomes very difficult to coerce them to do that, even with a statute in place, such as Montana's law. I believe that it should be used judiciously. I think that it should be used with those offenders that biologically are driven to hurt children.
When we checked in with Cattell, she wondered why the treatment wasn't more widely applied. Do you still think it was a good idea?
I would say yes, because we haven't had the experiment of its use.
One key difference between Montana's law and the one passed in Alabama last year. In Alabama, the treatment is required for people convicted of certain sex crimes against anyone younger than 13. Montana's law gives judges the option based on the severity of the crime and the number of repeat offenses. For MTN Investigates, I'm Evelyn Schultz. Back to you.
Now, MTN did learn of at least one case in the last 5 years where a judge ordered the treatment at sentencing. In 2015 in Flathead County, Justin George Jones was sentenced to 40 years in prison for sexual assault and ordered to undergo the Depo-Provera treatment if released. However, Jones remains incarcerated and is not eligible until 2040.